Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It's October 23rd, 2023. Let's talk about a fighter who is much better than I thought, and that's Jack Catterall. We'll talk about it. There are going to be betting opportunities here, folks. I thought he was very good before his fight against Jorge Linares, right? On the membership site, shameless plug, the hedge was the over 10.5 rounds, right? That delivered, right? Linares pulling the upset at greater than 7-1 odds did not, but you should be covered. You should have a profit, right? Because we call that the main part of the bet. But Catterall surprised me, and let's talk about how. Let's talk about how this impacts the future. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, boxing is an athletic activity, right? A fighter's athleticism matters to me. When I look at Catterall, he's not faster-handed than, let's say, today, a 38-year-old Jorge Linares. He's not as quick-footed or the athlete Jorge Linares is. And let's face it too, there's a charisma gap in his fights. Whether he's fighting a Josh Taylor, whether he's fighting a Jorge Linares, the other guy moves more, has a little bit more energy, a little bit more pep in his step, has a personality that's more fan-friendly, we'll call it, right? Gets caught up in the folklore of boxing, has a personality that sells tickets. Catterall, by contrast, is a flat liner. Now, let me just say this. I'll say it diplomatically. This is what I found in life. Understand, when I was a young kid in college, I had a bunch of friends. We were hitting parties, beer, you name it. And a lot of them ended up being engineers. A lot of them are completely different today, right? It's my belief, and this is totally non-scientific, that the people who are sharp around you, the people you consider to be smart, all have IQs around 120, right? There are very few Einsteins out there, right? Most of the people have, including some billionaires who are viewed as savvy, they have IQs around 120. Right now, what you'll find is when you run into a scientist, and understand, I have a client right now who's a scientist, right? When you run into a scientist or some kind of analyst, sometimes you'll find that they're sharp in their area of expertise, but that where they gain in what you would consider the IQ part of the intelligence spectrum, they lose in the emotional quotient part, the EQ part of the intelligence spectrum. Right? Just understand, this fight was interesting. We were blessed here. We were blessed because the announcers knew boxing. Right? The people doing the zone, they told you that Catterall was winning the fight even though Linares had more energy, right? Linares is bouncing around and stuff like that, but Catterall, the southpaw, was the one who is staying in the pocket. That's important. This is a guy who can operate the entire fight if he wants from the pocket, right? Isn't a great athlete, doesn't have quick legs or quick twitch muscles, right? He's not quick twitch. But yet, you notice he's an angles guy. Now, the sport to me at the highest levels are the guys who can play angles. In other words, Catterall can be in front of Linares, a guy who knocked down Lomachenko, a guy who, to this day, hit Devin Haney harder than I've seen anyone hit Devin Haney. Right? Catterall can stand in front of Linares, in part because Catterall's a southpaw. And Catterall can play the angles such that Linares has little to hit. In other words, Catterall is hiding himself behind the fight flow and the angles. He knows the punches that Linares can throw. He knows the angles Linares can throw them from. He knows what Linares is trying to accomplish. And with really a extremely high boxing IQ. He knows how to neutralize that and to counter Linares, standing pretty much right in front of him, only at a slight angle. Right, folks? It's breathtaking. Once you see it, you can't lose it. Right? Catterall does hurt Linares in the 5th round, but understand, by then, he has already established dominance to the point where he doesn't need to win on volume. He doesn't need to win on athleticism. He's winning on angles. And he has it so that he's able to throw and land meaningful straight lefts. But understand where it costs him. And he's not the first fighter I've seen like this. Right? The people on the telecast doing the telecast. Right? Tony Bellew was scoring the fight. They all had Catterall ahead by a wide margin. The viewer was blessed even more than that. Catterall was fighting a guy who is self-assured. So Linares acknowledged that he lost the fight. Right? Keep in mind, Linares gets buzzed but doesn't hit the canvas. He acknowledged that the younger guy, who's not that young, right? Linares is 38. Catterall is 30. He's in his 30s. Right? Linares acknowledged that he was outboxed. So you're the viewer. And the announcers, the star fighter who is scoring the fight, Catterall's opponent, all acknowledge that Catterall just put on a boxing clinic. Right? All of them acknowledge it. Linares could have tried to bluff because Linares is the more active guy. Linares is the more fan-friendly guy. But Linares doesn't even bluff. So then Eddie Hearn is there. And Eddie's a bit tough. Eddie talks about the fact that while Catterall was clinical, right? Catterall didn't step on the gas to stop Linares. So there is Catterall with all the compliments and stuff like that, with Eddie being a little critical of him. And folks, Catterall in this moment of victory, and it was impressive. I was looking at the fight and I thought, wow, this guy's a ringer. Understand, I only use that word when I think a guy is going to be an underdog in some big fights and has a legitimate chance of winning the fight. I was looking at this fight and I was like, oh, I need to remember Catterall. This guy might be able to beat people. In fact, Catterall is that rare fighter who should be able to repeat performances like this at higher weights because he's a technician. Right? By a technician, I mean a guy who is playing angles. It's not all about punching power. It's not all about physical attributes, hand speed, leg speed. No, he's out thinking opponents. Right? But in this moment of triumph, Catterall, and this is who he is, Fans need to understand and embrace this. He shouldn't even try to be someone else. Catterall was flat, right? Catterall is the guy who beats you. And then it's a math quiz for him, right? He's that engineering guy who, when you talk to some engineers, they are flat, right? I can tell you, I'm a divorce attorney, and sometimes we're talking about the most explosive stuff imaginable, right? I'll talk to an engineering client and I'll say, hey, do you feel that your wife was seeing someone else, right? I'm just telling you, emotive clients will say, nah, man, or yeah, I think she was creeping on me, right? But not engineers. They're clinical. You can't even tell the response from the body language. You actually have to lean forward and listen, because an engineer is emotionally flat, right? When I say an engineer, I'm overgeneralizing. Trust me, I know. Engineers, no need to flood the comment section to this video, right? But, families have that person who's emotionally flat. Folks, Catterall is a boxing engineer. He's emotionally flat, right? He thanked Jorge Linares for the compliments, right? Linares is one of these statesman types. You can tell he feels it's important to, have credibility, right? Linares had credibility, compliments Catterall after the fight. Catterall thanks him. Catterall's there while his promoter is talking about stepping on the gas. Now, somebody else would have said, hey, Eddie, I know that's the view from outside the ring, but inside the ring, can't you give me my respect for winning the fight against a guy who's been a champion multiple times? Right? Eddie, maybe I made this look easy. It wasn't that easy. Right? You can imagine the charismatic fighter, Riddick Bowe, who would actually talk with his promoter and make fun of the suggestion that he didn't close the show. Here, Catterall is just flat. Catterall just accepts what Eddie's saying. Catterall just goes about his business. Eddie's trying to pump up a fight between Catterall, a rematch between Catterall and a guy we all know he beat, Josh Taylor, right? But understand what Taylor has that Catterall doesn't have, right? You see Taylor, and Taylor looks like a guy you've seen at the pub, right? That fight, let's face it, even though both guys are from the UK, I believe that fight was in Scotland or something like that, and Taylor was awarded a very questionable decision that I didn't agree with. But Taylor's like the people's guy, isn't he? He's like the local who hopped in the ring and who is good in the ring. So fans are rooting for him in part on personality. With Catterall, you're actually rooting for Catterall based on boxing brilliance. So let me just say, the Catterall I saw, folks, I think the water's deep at 140, right? Regis Prograis, Ramirez, Teofimo, folks, they're all tough. They're all tough. I'm just telling you here, and I know it's counterintuitive, but Catterall is competitive against all of them. We understand that Teofimo has a problem with Sander Martin, another tough fighter. Guys like that who can movers, who can stick that jab and not stick around the pocket to engage. Right? Martin, in fact, might give Catterall a hard time. Right? But understand, Catterall wouldn't have to leave the pocket against Ramirez or against Teofimo Lopez, right? Even though Catterall's not as fast, let's go one division down. Even though Catterall is not as fast, as Shakur Stevenson, right? Stevenson will bust off combinations and you'll say, my God, to be young with hand speed, right? Just understand that, and Stevenson, southpaw, just like Catterall. But folks, that fight's an open question because they're both southpaws and because Catterall can neutralize hand speed. That's what he just did against Jorge Linares. I'm not saying Linares has Manny Pacquiao hand speed, right? I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is Linares has hand speed. And folks, Catterall just has the angles work where Linares had a hard time getting through Catterall's defense. And his defense is a little bit unorthodox. Tony Bellew mentions it. That, southpaws like to lean away from an opponent's right hand. Catterall has the angles figured out that a big percentage of the time he's leaning forward, believe it or not. Leaning forward on Linares' right hand. He has Linares' right hand blowing by his ear. Right, so this is an interesting fight for gamblers. But here's what we need to be careful of. Life's unfair. That's one of my mantras. How charismatic is the other fighter? Right? If the other fighter walks in the ring, I've always said, there's a charisma gap between Ray Leonard and Floyd Mayweather. Right? Mayweather, great defensively. Mayweather has the edge defensively. If you ask me about the skills of the fighters, right? Mayweather can hang with anybody. Mayweather can hang with Ray Robinson, quite frankly. Right? But you and I understand. A Ray Leonard hops in the ring. A Ray Robinson comes in the ring with his robes. Right? With his presence. Certain people have presence. I don't know why, but they do. Right? A Ray Robinson walks in the ring with that conch and that presence, that robe. Right? That early 50s aura. Right? That Chuck Berry type look. You know what I'm talking about. Right? That Chuck Berry type presence. That kind of charisma could drown out the brilliance that is Jack Catterall. Jack Catterall against Manny Pacquiao. Charismatic. Different type of charisma, but charismatic. Right? Not the guy who looks like he's fresh out the club, right? But, a guy who you understand is gifted. You understand is singular. Right? With Catterall, you have to think about non-boxing factors that might impact judges. Right? Let me just say, you would have to think about that if Crawford were to fight Canelo. Right? Whatever you think of Canelo, Canelo has charisma. Right? The fact that the guy's nickname translates to cinnamon, and we're all in love with it. Right? The fact that a guy named Mort Walker, that's his real name, uses somebody else's name, Ray Robinson. Right? People knew it. People figured out over time that Ray Robinson was actually Mort Walker. And the press gives him the nickname Sugar in a masculine sport like boxing. And the name takes off. Other guys start using the name. Sugar Ray Seals later. Sugar Ray Leonard. Right? Sugar Shane Mosley. Right? Tells you the level of charisma. Here you have a guy, Cinnamon. People flock. People flock to Canelo. In terms of brilliance, it's hard to imagine better than Crawford. Right? Ambidextrous, for crying out loud. A closer, for crying out loud. You look at Crawford's closing and you say, oh, that was with the right hand. A different fight, you say, oh, that was with the left hand. Right? Movement. But you understand, that they're going to be judges judging off of popularity and crowd noise. We're all human, right? Canelo comes in, swings and misses, the crowd goes crazy. Isn't that what happened in the Golovkin fight? The second one? Canelo swings and misses, crowd goes crazy. Some judges are going to get caught up with the crowd, right? Catterall is really a Pernell Whitaker type guy. Not as athletic as Whitaker. I know it's heresy to compare anyone to Whitaker, but Catterall is a Whitaker type guy. Understand what happened to Whitaker. Whitaker beat Chavez. They called it a draw. Right? Catterall beats Taylor. They gave that to Taylor. Right? I'm just telling you, in big fights, the charisma of the opponent is going to matter. But make no mistake, if you're actually looking at the fight, you're seeing the punches that miss. You're seeing how comfortable this guy is in the pocket. You're seeing the level of defense. You notice he's able to place his head in a way where a fast-handed guy with power like Linares can't find him. And he's not moving away. Right? If you're a fan of the heavyweight division, you might remember Tim Witherspoon, right? Who actually won the title. He was a champion for a bit. Right? You know you're dealing with a master technician when people say, hey, does he hit that hard? And you say, no. You say, wow, does he have a lot of hand speed? You say, no. Does he have a lot of foot speed? You say, no. You say, well, how can you say he was winning the fight? And your response is, you just have to watch the fight for yourself. It'll be obvious to you. Right? So Catterall, folks, he's in play. He's in play. Right? The hedge on the membership thing was over 10.5 rounds. Folks, Catterall made that easily. In other words, he got knocked down less times against Jorge Linares than Lomachenko did. And trust me when I say Loma is moving a lot more than Catterall. Catterall has one loss, it's questionable. That Josh Taylor loss. Right, my advice to Catterall is if he thinks about fighting Teofimo Lopez, take it from a guy who was raised in Queens, went to high school in the Bronx. Right? If he fights Teofimo Lopez, you can't do it in New York City. Right? New Yorkers are going to view Teofimo as one of their own. Right? The rematch against Josh Taylor, don't fight him in Scotland. Right? The Catteralls of the world have to make sure they have even footing with an opponent. Right? You cannot fight charismatic guys in their backyard. You just can't. Right? If he weighed more, I would say, look, player, don't fight Canelo in Las Vegas. You understand there's some places, don't fight Beterbiev in Canada. Right? In the ring, this is a special fighter. But he can get beaten in the publicity realm. Right? Just understand what happened, folks. The judges thought he won the fight convincingly. Right? Some people are even wondering how Linares was credited with 4 rounds from some judges. Right? Understand, the guys calling the fight had him winning the fight convincingly. When they announced that he won the fight, Linares diplomatically motioned to him. In the post-fight interview, Linares basically said, look, this guy is a great fighter. I consider him a champion, an unbeaten one, right? Because of that dodgy Josh Taylor loss. Right, folks, this is a tough out. Right? This is the guy who the crowd's going to overlook because he has that engineering thing going on. Right? He comes across a bit like Peter Thiel, if you know that investor, where he's a little nerdy. You're listening to Peter Thiel interviews about things like PayPal that Peter Thiel was behind. And Peter Thiel makes it sound like something that's not exciting for some odd reason, right? That's Catterall, right? He's not the guy who opens up the shirt and you see an S on his chest. But I'm just telling you, if you're a gambler, you need to keep track of guys like this. I'm just telling you, if he catches a Ramirez on an off night, a Prograis, in front of a neutral crowd, he has a chance to win. I think this guy has a better chance of beating Prograis than does Devin Haney. Just food for thought. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Let me also say too, Eddie Hearn needs to stop kidding himself. Right? A highly technical guy like this, you can't tell him finish an opponent. That's not who he is. Right? He has stoppages. Maybe he finishes the opponent, but the finish has to come in the normal course of the fight. This is not Nigel Benn. Right? Doesn't mean he's not special. He is. But this is the guy who has the angles figured out to the point where he knows he's going to slowly wither you. And that's the game plan. Right? Let this guy be in his comfort zone. Don't ask him. That might be enough to beat some great fighters in this sport. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.